Hello and welcome to a live deprogram. I'm your host, Keri Smith. And thank you, first of all, thank you to those who are here. I see some regulars here. I apologize for moving the show an hour today with start time, but I just had a lot of real life stuff offline coming up that I had to deal with. So I appreciate you being here. Today's going to be a little bit different. I figured I would do sort of respond to viewer suggestion or request. Somebody in the last live show that we did, not the Christian panel, but the last live deprogrammed, asked that I do an episode just about addiction or my personal experience quitting drinking. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm just going to, maybe it'll be a short one. I'll just talk about that a little bit. But if you have questions, or even better, if you have advice for people, or if you've been through this before, quitting a bad habit, quitting an addiction, a full blown addiction, quitting something that you knew was bad for you, but that you used as a crutch, then feel free to, in the comments or the chat, feel free to leave what worked for you, leave advice, leave suggestions, because I always kind of tell people, take what works for you and leave what doesn't. I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to this. So you might hear things that are well intentioned from people, but in your experience doesn't work. I think it's a mistake to be very controlling about, it always must be done in this way. And in my experience, that's not true. People quit things in different ways. So if you have advice, feel free to leave it. Hello, Pirate Tomsky. What time do you call this? This is an hour. This is 2:00 Central. That's what we're doing here today. Glad to see you. Well, maybe by starting an hour late, we got some people who aren't usually here, because I see Commissar General Ma is here, so rarely catch the show live. So good to see you. Um, Pirate is addicted to booty. I'm addicted to puns. That's a good addiction to have. So couple of announcements. April 27th is the Minds Fest that's happening in Austin, Texas at the Vulcan Theater. You can get information at minds.com. I'm going to be moderating some panels. There are going to be some great speakers, debaters, comedy people coming, include Jimmy Dore, Alex Stein, um, Luke Radowski, Lauren Chen, Shane Cashman, Libby Emmons. It's a whole list of people. You can find it online. And the one last year was great. It was amazing. We had some surprise guests at that one who dropped in. Alex Jones dropped into that one and ended up being on a panel with Destiny. And that was just fireworks to watch the two of them going back and forth. So you never know what you're going to get. And I hope to see, I know I'm going to see some of you there. We are doing a meetup on the Friday, the day before. I still have not announced the place yet. I'm going to be doing that this week, but we're going to meet up somewhere in Austin and just, have coffee, have snacks, stuff like that. So if you're in town, I hope I get to see you on Friday, and I'll let you know when that is. Okay. Helena, I call it 3 p.m. Eastern. Yes. Yes. We're doing it an hour later today. Apologies. Septimus Prime. This is the kind of stuff I want to hear. People who've successfully done this. Septimus Prime says, I'm 1 month away from 3 years sober. I went to one meeting. It wasn't for me. I picked up 3D printing through prop building, and just the act of making things and staying busy working keeps me sober. Thank you for sharing that. The meetings for alcohol in particular, I have met some people who insist it must be done. I think that it's a good idea to start there if you are not having any success quitting. AA helped me tremendously, but it's not for everyone. So congratulations, first of all, 3 years. That's amazing. Um, for my husband and I, we quit together. So we quit, it'll be 5 years at the end of October for me and the beginning of November for him. And I am a person who never would have thought I could quit, because I struggled with alcohol in particular for so long, for over 10 years probably, of wondering, is this a problem? Is it not a problem? Always being able to point to people who were worse drunks than I was, always being able to point to the fallacy of of being a functional, what they call a functional alcoholic. And so for a long time, I lived in that denial. And sometimes I think it's, in some ways, there's different challenges for different types of addicts. But if you're one of those kind who think, well, I'm functional and I'm not XYZ, the challenges that come with that are that you may stay in it for longer because you're sort of in denial about how it's impacting your life. And you might be in that place of limbo that I was in, where you're continually measuring yourself against other people and saying, well, they do this too. And, or I'm in a drinking culture, for most of that time I lived in Los Angeles, where that was the way most people socialized outside of work. It was a lot of people I knew drank as much as I did, and so I was always sort of measuring against that. And of course, you can see the pitfall there is that if you don't ever hit, if you're expecting that there's going to be a rock bottom, or that there's going to be something dramatic, or you have to have lost a job or something in order to say, oh, it's a problem, well then the downside of that is that you might stay in it for decades, waiting for that thing to happen while it's having negative impacts on your life. So, I was one of those people, and I mentioned this when this came up Monday in the chat and when someone asked about this, but I'll just share it again in case, this is gonna be a standalone video, so hopefully people who are looking for advice might find this later and have not have heard this. So one of the things that helped me get out of that period of limbo was, and this has helped people, I think. I've shared this advice, I've shared this story with people who have other kinds of problems that have nothing to do with alcohol, where they're just maybe having trouble making a decision or deciding if they wanna, leave a job or a location that they live in or a relationship, or just leave something, right? And they're not sure, and they've been going back and forth on it forever, for years. Um, I was listening to a YouTube video, and I would do this where I would go and look for videos about, how do you know if you have a drinking problem, things like that. And I'd found a video of a call-in radio show, and it was sometime like an overnight radio show program, and it was this guy who had called in to this chaplain at like 2 a.m., and he was asking him, he was listening to the chaplain all the things that he drank during the day. He was like, this is how much I drink at, during the day at this time of day, and then at this time of day I drink this, and this is how much I weigh, and this is how much I eat. So, he wanted him to calculate, do you have a drinking problem from how much you're imbibing and your weight and other factors. And the chaplain had such a great response. It struck me immediately, and it stuck with me. And he said, no one who doesn't have a drinking problem calls into a radio show at 2 in the morning to ask if they have a drinking problem. I don't need to know anything else. I mean, basically, he was saying it doesn't matter all these things you're using to calculate. There's a problem here because you're seeking advice for it. At It's keeping you up at night even. And that had a big impact on me, and maybe it will on you if you're one of those people in limbo, because that just crystallized for me, this is the end of my questioning. This is the end of the limbo. There is no equation. There's never, it's almost like, I've heard, I think it was Jordan Peterson talking about how sometimes people wait for the best choice instead of just making a good choice, and they stay in a period of limbo forever. And this was sort of similar, where it wasn't like the best choice, but I was waiting for the best definition, the best um, diagnosis, that I couldn't get out of in order to make a decision. And that freed me from that, because it was very obvious to me. It sort of just, it lit things up in a different way for me to see how much time I had spent wrestling with this question. So I didn't quit that night, but that's something that stuck in my head. Another thing that stuck in my head was, and I mentioned this on the previous show, was I saw an old lecture of Jordan Peterson's where he was talking about how we all have one thing that if we if someone asks us to think of one thing that if we gave it up, we suspect we might have a better life in a year. We all have one thing that will come to mind. And he was saying, for everybody in the audience, it's something different is probably coming to your mind right now. And when I heard that, what came to my mind immediately was alcohol. And what he said about it was, why don't you try giving that thing up for 1 year and see where you're at in a year? And if you are quantitatively in a better place, if you can look at it and say, absolutely, this is a better place to have given this up for a year, then why not try 5 years? Because imagine how much of a better place you could be in 5 years if you've already seen this positive change in 1 year. And something about phrasing it that way also stuck out to me. It was really important to me and stuck with me because I think I was also one of those people who had a hard time saying, I'm never doing this again. And uh, that was it's just a psychological trick maybe to my brain to say, I'm just giving this up for 1 year as an experiment to see what happens at the end of the year. That was easier for me to deal with and to embark upon. And maybe you're one of those people for whom you think, I could never say that I'm never doing this again. I need this crutch so bad, I can't even imagine not ever doing it again. So try this. Why not? Try this, even if it is a way of playing a trick on yourself. Try it and see. Go in for 1 year. Just commit to 1 year. And in my experience of that, so my husband and I committed to 1 year of quitting. And my experience with that is that just a couple months in, or you know, maybe even not that long, but very, very soon into that year, we both realized and recognized that we would not be going back. And I still at that point didn't say never again, but it's like I knew inside never again. Because I had made it that far already and I had already seen improvements. So by the time the year came around, it was a no-brainer. It was this sense of not just a sense of accomplishment at having done that for a year and given up this thing that I thought at one point in my life I thought I could never live without, but it was also looking at my life and being able to objectively say, I am in such a different place just a year in, a place I couldn't have imagined, such a better place in all aspects of my life. So why would I open that door again? Let's do it. Let's try 5 years. Let's do the 5 year thing. So coming up this fall will have been my 5 years. And at that point, he had said, then look at your life and see if you're in a much better place after 5 years, why not try 10? And you sort of keep on going. So I can already tell you when I hit the 5 year mark, I'm going to continue in sobriety because I've made it this far and my life is so much better. And in fact, it's completely unrecognizable from the life I used to live. Um, let's see. Septimus Prime. OMG, that's what worked for me too. I called it my linchpin. Once I saw that drinking was the thing holding me back, all the tumblers fell into place. I lost weight. I found love. I started a business. Yes. There are so many things. There are so many things that I was able to tackle or ways in which my life improved after giving up alcohol that I wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gotten rid of that thing for a year to see what would happen. Um, you know, I've I found my husband. Well, I found him before and we quit together, but we ended up getting married. Um, I got baptized. I had found and became a part of this really beautiful church community. Um, I sold my house after we got married and we bought this beautiful old home. I never could have imagined being able to live in a place like this. Yes, we have a lot of work ahead of us and a lot of money to put into it to renovate it. But even that, as frustrating as it can be at times, is such a joy. I never thought I would be in a place to be able to do that. Um, we live a blessed life, and I don't have that struggle that I had when I was constantly battling, like, my number one demon was alcohol, because all the other trials in life, I couldn't it was almost like I couldn't even address those until I got rid of the alcohol one first. Um, one of the ways I've described it, and maybe this will resonate with you, maybe you're one of those people who's not, the worst of the worst, and so you're constantly asking yourself, "Do I have a problem with this thing or not? Should I give this up or not? Oh, it's not that bad. Oh, I know people who drink this much." Oh, maybe you're one of those people, and so maybe this will be familiar to you. One of the biggest problems I had was that I couldn't do a lot of long-term thinking. At least I felt like I couldn't because every day was sort of you waking up with adjusting to, the hangover, getting over the hangover and getting on with my day and then like clockwork, even if I had said, not going to drink today, that evening would be okay. Well, we'll just have a little bit, with dinner or what have you. And it would always be, it was almost like I was a slave to it in the same way that I'm a slave now and was then and still am now to coffee. But it was just a routine. It was part of my day. And it felt like I had brain fog sort of where I was always trying to just get through that day that was in front of me while being on that addictive cycle to this substance that I was putting in my body, the withdrawal part of it and then the drunk part of it, all of it together. So that greatly improved after I got rid of it. Um, the other thing is that you find that you have a lot more time once you give it up. And I think this is probably true no matter what the addiction is, whether it's whether it's alcohol or porn or gambling or video games. I just watched a video about video game addiction. I'm not talking about just playing it here and just like I'm not talking about people who can drink normally or people who play video games normally. I'm talking about if it's a problem for you and you spend far too much time doing it and you wish you could stop spending that much time on it. Anything that takes up that much of your time, once you quit it, you notice you have so much more time in the day to do other things. I know that sounds kinda silly maybe, and if you haven't struggled with something like this, a bad habit, however you wanna characterize it, an addiction that, has taken up a lot of time, maybe you won't maybe that seems like a no-brainer, but once you get rid of it, it's like, at the end of the day, let's say you get home from work, there's so many different things you could put your time and attention into other than, alcohol being the primary one that's brought along with, like, everything else. So, no matter what you're doing, like, even if you're just sitting and vegging out and watching a movie with your spouse or a friend or by yourself, you remember the movie, all of it. You don't get to that part, that hazy part at the end of the night of, like, "What happened at the end?" Or, there's none of that. You have more time in the day to do things like I'm gonna spend 2 hours weeding my garden today or this evening or what have you, or I'm gonna like, my husband bakes a lot now, and that's time consuming and enjoyable for him and cathartic, and, you know, that wouldn't be something that we were doing or he was doing if we were spending all that time, like, boozing. That's the best word for it. So, you get a lot more time back, and in a way, I think of, the time when I was drinking as sort of a long form procrastination, or sometimes I think of it as long form self-deletion, where it's just this, kind of pissing away of the time that God has given us here on this earth. Procrastination, that's probably a good way of putting it, and avoidance, and also missing out on life, like missing out on time. I don't really view I don't view it in the same way that I used to when I see people, um, like, one of my jobs involves working around alcohol. Again, I'm not saying not everyone can do that. Some people, again, not everything works not the same thing works for everyone. I'm able to work around people who drink, and sometimes, not just there, but, like, out. My husband plays a lot of shows, and there's a lot of people drinking and what have you. And there's normal drinkers, and then there's people who drink in excess. at events, you know? Maybe they just drink in excess when they go out. I have no idea. I'm not judging. I'm just saying the way that I look at that now, if I'm looking at a scene, a party of people, and people get to the stage of drinking where they're probably not going to remember a whole lot or, make memories. I I view that now, it helps me to look back on the time I spent doing that and to understand that in a lot of cases, I was just wasting my time. And I thought, you know, because I had pleasurable feelings at the time, this is fun, this is joy, this is celebration, what have you. Some of it was, but some of it was just not being grateful for the time I had been given and not using it to create something like lasting memories. Um, Again, that's not to judge anyone's choices of, you know, drinking or not drinking. Lots of people drink normally. If I could drink normally, I would. I just had to accept at a certain point that I couldn't. Hey, Randy, just looking to see who's here. Randy and I have talked about this offline also. Um, in terms of dealing with cravings, if you have questions, put them in the chat, by the way. You don't have to leave a super chat. I may not see it if you don't. So if there's a good question, maybe one of the mods could just highlight it for me. Hey, Two Sisters and Some Yarn is here. Behold, I see another admin. Yeah, so if you see a question that I've missed, just make sure I see it. Um, but in terms of when you get feelings and cravings, so some people have asked me about this. I've gotten messages and emails about it. In my experience, well, with quitting drinking, I didn't use hypnosis or anything. But I have experienced hypnosis before, for quitting smoking years and years ago, and I've read the success rates of people who try hypnosis, and they're much higher than people who don't. So hypnosis is something that you could try, either going to a practitioner or finding there are even apps for this. Um, for me, I think the biggest thing now that I do is occasionally, if I do get a craving, and I do, they don't come nearly as frequently as I thought they would. If you're still struggling with drinking or some other addiction and you think, how am I going to get past these cravings? Just trust me when I say they fall away faster than you think they will, probably, and they don't come nearly as frequently. So at this point where I'm at, you know, almost 5 years in, I don't have that many cravings for alcohol. In fact, we have house concerts here in our home, which we streamed once before, and my husband plays a lot of wineries, and sometimes they gift him with a nice bottle of wine, and so we just put that away and collect those until we have a house concert, so we have nice wine for the guests. I never thought I could have alcohol in the house and not drink it. And I do have alcohol in the house, and I don't drink it. Those cravings don't come very often. When they do come, you might think, like, is that dangerous? Because you know, it's there. When they do come, it's I've learned how to sort of short circuit it almost immediately, and maybe this will be helpful for you. I just What I do now is I just think through the whole story of events that will happen if I have one drink. I don't allow myself to just think. If you just think about that one thing, you know, well, if I just look at porn just once, or if I just, you know, have the one drink and I'll stop there. I don't allow myself to live in that delusion anymore. I spent a lot of time in that delusion all the years that I unsuccessfully tried to quit, where it was like, oh, let me just try this, or let me try moderation, or let me try counting the number of drinks, or let me do, you know, I cannot have just one. And I think once you get to that acceptance, it's a lot easier. And the way I think about it now is, you know, I don't wanna have just one anyway. I think that's awful. I think it's torture. Why if I have just one, I'm gonna be wanting more. So why would I do that to myself? Why? Because then I have to go right back into that struggle, right? I don't wanna do that. And I know you have to come to that acceptance with yourself where you've seen look back rationally like an outside observer at your behavior over however long it is that you've been thinking, maybe I have a problem and I want to quit this. Look back at your behavior, think about the times that you tried to moderate, think about the times you tried to quit and failed. And I think you really have to come to that acknowledgement. You have to admit, I don't have control over this. I can't have just the one. And in fact, having just one sucks. So it's better for me not to have any. I would rather not have any than to be forced to have just one. There's a funny expression that I've heard before about alcohol, and I can't remember. Somebody might have said this in an AA meeting I was in, but they said, first I have a drink, then the drink has a drink, and then the drink has me. And that's also stuck with me all this time because that's so true for me. I might say I'm just having the one. As soon as I have it, that alcohol's in my system and the alcohol's talking for it. It's like, well, just have one more. Just one more. And then once I've had the second one, all bets are off. So it's never going to stop at that one. And so what happens now if I get a craving is, you might have a bit of nostalgia about it. Like sometimes as part of my job or otherwise, I might see my husband and I, it helps to have, you know, a close friend or a spouse or someone who's gone through all the same things because you can talk about it. My husband and I might be walking in a cute little downtown area with lots of little shops on a Sunday afternoon, and people are outside having brunch and mimosas or things that cause nostalgia for us, where we're like, and you have that feeling about like, oh, wouldn't it be, this is the perfect, wouldn't it be nice to sit outside and have a glass of champagne? Like this would be you know, you have that moment where it's a flash of longing for some positive feeling that you had in the past. And immediately when I have that, I don't let it go by unnoticed. If I'm with him, I will tell him I just had that feeling of nostalgia and we'll talk about it and laugh about it. Um, because I don't want it to go by unnoticed. I don't want it to be something that starts to build up. And if I'm by myself, I will seriously think through everything that would happen after. I won't let myself just sit with the pleasant feeling of, "Hey, remember what it felt like to sit outside and have brunch with friends and have a." I won't let myself sit just in that false positive memory because I know what always came after or would come after. And so I run through what would happen. The worst case scenario, not the best case days, not the days where you didn't go into excess or whatever. I'm talking about the worst case scenario. I force myself to relive that and think it all the way through so that the end feeling there is not that positive nostalgia feeling. It's the shame or the self-disgust or, I end on that, and that nips any kind of um trigger or feeling that, "Oh, I think I'm thinking positively of alcohol." It nips it right in the bud. So, I don't know if that will work for you or not, but try that. If you're someone who's quitting and you're struggling and you have a craving, think it all the way through to the worst possible place that you ever were, and relive all of that and acknowledge that that's basically what you're saying you're okay with happening again if you were to do that. Um, so let's see. Dark water. I've never been a drinker, but I can guarantee that if I do drink, it will inspire cravings for my drug of choice. That is great self-awareness. And yes, I'm one of those people who when we quit drinking alcohol, we quit all substances. Like I never really I wasn't one of those people who smoked pot all the time or anything, but I did have it now and then. I won't have it now. Even though technically, I could convince myself, "Oh, that's not the thing you had a problem with," et cetera, because like you, dark water, I know myself well enough to know that if I'm on any kind of substance and I'm not in my right mind and not sober-minded, I'm much more likely to reach for the drug of my choice, which is wine or champagne. And so I'm not gonna put myself in that situation. I'm not gonna pull the carpet out from under my feet. So that's very self-aware. Oh, my husband's here. Anthony Garcia Music is here, guys. I'm very excited. I haven't seen him in a couple days, and I get to see him today. So good to see you in the chat. He says, living in South Korea got me to the top of my alcoholic game. It was the Audubon of drinking. Yeah, sometime Anthony might join me on one of these streams if we do another one of these and tell his story. He's told it before on a couple of different podcasts about drink. One was about music where they just kind of got into that part of his story, but another was specifically about quitting drinking where he told his whole story. And we have a lot of overlap, and we also have some differences in the way that we quit, and so he would probably have some advice that I don't have. For example, I was one of those people who I needed some kind of structure and support system when I quit. So I started going to AA, and I found it really helpful. To get up every morning at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., even sort of changing your life in that way, like doing something that wasn't usual for you before, can help you when you're getting rid of a bad habit to institute a new habit. And so I think that part of it helped me to suddenly say, "No, this is new, Keri. This is something different. I'm gonna wake up every day at a time." I didn't used to wake up at 6 in the morning and go to this, like, early 7 a.m. meeting, and that that helped me to see, like, the holistically, my whole self and my whole behavior system as changing, as being different, and it helped me to view my old habits, my old behavior is not a part of that. So, I went to AA for several months pretty regularly. I did not have a sponsor. I didn't I well, I had one at the beginning, but anyway, I did not think she would I did I ended that relationship. Not the relationship, but having her as the sponsor. So I didn't really have a sponsor, and, when COVID happened, they shut down the AA meetings, and I quit going at that time. So that would have been, like, March. That would have been maybe 6 months in, I quit going to AA, and I know a lot of people fell off the wagon as a result of that, from them shutting down the meetings. Isn't it funny the things that they considered essential and the things they didn't? Liquor stores were still open, but people couldn't go to their AA meetings. So, I quit going at that point. Anthony had never gone, and he just quit, without that. And then I would talk to him about stuff I'd heard in the meetings or things that had helped me, of course, but, he did go with me to one. I went to one after that. There was a group of old-timers, one of whom I knew through my church, who had branched off from the regular AA meeting in our little town and had started a group of outlaws and that, sort of not really breaking the rules, but saying, "We're gonna meet anyway." And so I went to one of those meetings, and Anthony came with me to that one, and that one was really helpful. Um, I haven't been back since then, and if I ever got to a place where I could tell, like, if I had started having recurring cravings constantly or struggling with it, if it was occupying any part of my mind, I would go back immediately. Um, and I know people who still go today, who've been going for decades and who swear by it and been able to help many people and been able to help keep themselves sober. And I think AA sort of my short time in it, my opinion on it was that it can be helpful for anyone for any number of issues. You don't have to be someone whose crutch is alcohol. You don't have to be an alcoholic, because one of the biggest takeaways I had from it was learning to submit, learning to acknowledge that I don't have the power to control everything, and certainly not this addiction. And then, expanding that beyond that to understand there's all kinds of things I don't have control over. And I think that would help a lot of people, when it comes to living in this world. And dealing with the chaos and the darkness and the things that they wanna control. I'm one of those people who I sort of look at sometimes I look at political activism and people who are out in the streets protesting and saying what they think we should do policy-wise on every little thing. Sometimes I look at them the way Jordan Peterson does, like, "You should go home and clean your room, like, get your house in order." Is this not a very complicated way to avoid dealing with the things that you actually do have control over? Our sphere of influence is limited. Most of us really only have control over things within our own household, our community, maybe city government, you have a bigger impact. But I think we're encouraged to live in this delusion that that we can I don't know, that we can affect things on a national scale by picking up a protest sign and going outside. I'm not saying there's no need for protest ever. I still have been a part of protests here and there. I just think that a lot of people, especially on the left, the world that I used to live in, they spend a lot of time focusing on those big picture things to avoid looking at the, smaller not smaller, but the personal things that they actually could change. So, let's see. I'm just checking out the chat to see if I've missed anything from you guys. The big book is based off of Christianity too. It is. It talks about acknowledging a higher power. And from what I understand, it used to be more explicitly, talking about God, and then they changed that to higher power to make it so that I guess they weren't needlessly turning off people who might have a prejudice to, hearing the word God and getting triggered and saying, "Oh, that's not for me." The population needed their soma during lockdown, says Pirate Tomska. Yeah, drinking went up. A lot of awful things went up during the lockdowns, of course. Anxiety, depression, domestic abuse. I don't think those who make the policy decisions really cared. Chip Douglas, if you are determined, no one can stop you. If you're not willing, no one can help you. This is true. I think part of the problem, though, this is something I still think about a lot because there are still other things, other behaviors I'm struggling to change. And one thing that my pastors talked about that I thought about a lot is sort of developing a greater love and uh, compulsion for something positive. You know, because people who are in this place that you're talking about, they might say, "Well, I am determined. I do want to quit." And then they try for a day and they fail. And they might do that might happen to them so many times that they start to believe, "I guess I just can't quit. I guess I don't want it." And actually having been in that place for so many years with alcohol, I think I did want it. I just didn't want it enough. There were other things I wanted more. I wanted that avoidance more. At the end of the day, I wanted to be able to shut off my brain more than I wanted to quit. I wanted whatever it was, that illusory thing, that temporary thing that it was giving me, I wanted that more. And so my pastor's done these sermons about changing your affections. Like, for example, I'm trying to remember, I think one of the examples he gave was if you're a man who struggles with lust, for example, refocusing that in a godly place, like on your wife, or refocusing that in a place that's not something like porn. uh it's a matter of starting to the men who don't cheat, for example, he was saying it's because they have greater affection for their wife than they do for that thing that's tempting them. It's a hierarchy of affections, like what do you put at the top? And I think for people who are in that weird place where they think they wanna quit, but they're having trouble quitting, It's not that they don't wanna quit, they do. It's just that they still have a greater affection for whatever it is that they think the alcohol is giving them. Does that make sense? And so maybe I think you should spend time if that's you, if you tried to quit many times and you haven't been able to, just sit down and maybe write out, "What is it that I get from alcohol or gambling or porn," or whatever the thing is that you're struggling with. What is it that I think I'm getting? And try and take yourself out of it and look at it like a third party, like an objective third party. What is it that is giving me a dopamine hit, allowing me to not deal with certain emotions, allowing me to check out, whatever those things are. Maybe there's a lot of anger you're masking with it. I'm not sure. I've got, um I've got a video here pulled up. I have a couple. I don't wanna play all of these. These were a few I was watching before I started. Maybe I'll play this one. So there's a couple different channels that take Jordan Peterson clips and put them to inspirational music. And I know it sounds kinda cheesy, but it works. It helps to listen to these kind of things. So I'm gonna play one of the ones that I've listened to before that might help you, or at least part of it. Let's see. So this is not on Peterson's channel. This is on some other person's clip channel where they take things they find inspiring or helpful or advice and they set it to music and to photos. So here we go. This is called "Watch When You Feel Like Giving Up."
When I was 25 or so, I probably weighed about 138 pounds. I smoked like a pack of cigarettes a day. I drank tremendous amount of alcohol. I was from northern Alberta, this rough little town up in northern Alberta called Fairview, and there were long winters there, and my friends were heavy drinkers, and most of them dropped out of school by the time they were 15 or 16, went off to work on the oil rigs, and it was a rough town, and we drank a lot. I started when I was 14, and you know, um, and so I had a lot of bad habits, let's say, and things that were, and I wasn't in great shape physically, and I was also still intellectually obsessed by as I am now, and so that would have been in 85. But I decided around then, about 85, 84, something like that, maybe a little earlier, that I was really going to try to get my act together, and so I started doing that. I first of all I quit smoking. Oh, that took a long time because I eventually had to quit drinking too in order to quit smoking. And I started working out, started playing sports, which I'd never done. I was a small kid. I'd been skipped a grade, and I was small for my age. So sports were never, especially team sports, were never really a domain of expertise for me. Although I skied and went trapping with my dad, went cross country skiing and camping and all that. So but when I went to graduate school, I started swimming. the first, the first physical exercise routine I did, I enrolled in a swimsercise course, I think it was called. So it was me and this like really overweight kid, and like these 60-year-old women and men, they could out exercise me like mad. It was really embarrassing. Me and the overweight kid, we'd be just panting ourselves 3/4 to death at the end of the bloody workout, and these 60-year-old women who weren't in great shape were like chatting away as if nothing was going on at all in the pool. So that was quite embarrassing, and as was going to the weight room, because when I started, I could barely bench press 75 pounds, and people used to keep coming over and helping me, which was the last thing I bloody well wanted, but certainly needed. And I got to the point where I could bench press 225 pounds. I think that was the best I did, and I gained about 30 pounds of muscle in a year and a half. So that was a good thing. So like I was kind of a wild man, and I'm a little bit manic in my temperament. So I was kind of going every direction at the same time. So and I don't regret that. I had a fine time when I was a kid, but I needed really to get disciplined, and I had to do it because I was working on these hard problems that I've been discussing with all of you, and I've been working on them really, obsessively since I was probably about 18, maybe even earlier than that. Got to the point around 25 when I was in graduate school trying to get my PhD, doing all my research. Like I published 15 papers by the time I graduated with my PhD, which was I think by a fairly large measure the most papers that any graduate student at that time had ever published at McGill. I think that's right. Might have been twice as many, or maybe twice as many, maybe even 3 times as many. And at the same time, I wrote Maps of Meaning, which was a terribly difficult thing to do, because I was writing about 3 hours a day doing that. And I couldn't do all that and continue with my misbehavior, my sort of, my, what would you say, my, my hedonistic, my hedonistic, my massive hedonistic consumption of alcohol and all of that. I just couldn't keep it up, and also work seriously on the issues that were at hand. So,
I think I'm going to pause it here for a second. I think this is sort of him finding something he had greater affection for, like I was talking about. He wanted to finish his book. He wanted to keep up with his work and the stuff that he was doing that he was obsessed with, and it was very important to him, and he couldn't do both. Somebody in the chat, oh, hey, it's Jardum. Jardum says, I think I drink out of loneliness and boredom. Very familiar, yes. Very familiar. And Night Train had good advice for that. He says, I completely understand. Drinking is a temporary distraction when you're bored. If you want to quit, find something to do. Yes. Find something, not just something to do, something that you really enjoy doing. Something that is going to put the drinking in stark relief, where you're not able to do this thing you really enjoy doing if you keep the drinking. If you want to quit the drinking, you're doing it because you're bored and lonely. Find anything. I don't know, woodworking, gardening, baking, exercising, going to the range, joining a D&D group where you meet up with people. I don't know what it is. I'm just saying there's got to be something that you maybe have always wanted to pursue or try, and you just put it on the back burner and said, I can't do that. And part of that might be because you spend too much time drinking. Pick that thing up, because the more time you put into it, the more it's going to cause you to have to make that decision to give up the drinking that won't allow you to do that thing.
I had to stop. That's a sacrifice. I had to stop messing about and straighten myself out. And I got.
What the science is showing us is the universe appears.
Oh no, there's an ad. Okay.
The woman who's my wife, Tammy, who I've known since she was 8 years old, she lived across the street from me in this little town called Fairview, and I was in love with her like the first time I saw her, which is quite the bloody thing. So that's worked out pretty well for me. But she came to live with me about the same time, and we decided jointly to get our act together, and we swore that we'd tell each other the truth, which I think she's actually done better than me. Like, I don't think she's lied to me ever in our entire marriage, which is unbelievable. And it's been so useful because I can really tell her things and we can really talk. So I tell you, if you want to have a good relationship, man, you embed it in the truth, because if you don't embed it in the truth, you don't have a relationship. It's just lies. It's a tissue of lies, and it will dissolve in the chaos as soon as a crisis comes along. So the truth is a terrible thing, but not compared to falsehood. So
advice for students here?
yeah, read great books. Really, man. You've got this 4-year period that has been carved out of your lives by society. It's given you an identity, like a high quality identity, and freedom at the same time. Man, you're not going to get that again in your life. You've got a respectable identity, university student, and complete freedom associated with that, or as near as you're ever going to get. And you've got these unbelievable libraries that are full of the writings of people who are intelligent and articulate beyond comprehension. And and you can go there and you can learn all this. And you might think, well, why should you learn it? Well, you learn it to get a job, or you learn it to get good grades, or you learn it to get a degree. And that's all nonsense. It's nonsense. The reason that you come to university to be educated is because there is nothing more powerful than someone who is articulate and who can think and speak. It's power. And I mean power of the best sort. It's authority and influence and respectability and competence. And so you come to university to craft your highest skill. And your highest skill is to be found in articulated speech. And if you're a master at formulating your arguments, you win everything. And better than that, when you win everything, everyone around you wins too. Because to transform yourself into, let's consider your transformation to something approximating the logos. It means you shine a light on the whole world. Well, there's nothing more exciting to do than that. There's nothing better you can possibly do. And to think that you're coming to university to be, trained to have a job, it's like, great, that's a hell of a lot better than being unemployed and covered with Cheeto dust while you're snacking away in front of your video game in the basement. But it's not and I don't have anything against video games, by the way, but it's hardly a triumphant call to being in the world. And that's what university should be calling for. It's like, God, you people, I know what Harvard students are like. I taught here for 5 years. You people are spectacular. You're spectacular. You're all capable of being world beaters. You transform yourself into something that's articulated and sensible and grounded in history and knowledgeable and wise, man. You can do anything you want, and hopefully anything you want for good. Because if you have any sense, everything you want to do would be for the good, because there's nothing more compelling or meaningful or useful in combating the tragedy of life than to struggle with all your soul on behalf of the good. And the universities have forgotten that. It's why everyone's bailing out of the humanities, and they should. The humanities are corrupt. And they're corrupt because they're not telling students this. It's so bloody obvious. It's like, learn to think, learn to speak, learn to read. It makes you a superpower, an individual superpower. You have and I don't understand why that isn't just told to students. It's not that hard to understand, and everyone wants to hear it. It's like, really? I could do that? I could do that? It's like, yeah, really, you could do that. And the whole society around you has labored for really thousands of years to provide every single one of you with this spectacular opportunity that you have while you're undergraduates and graduate students here, man. Everyone's just praying that you would come here and manifest everything that you could manifest. And that's what you should be doing, instead of waving placards and complaining about how you're oppressed, for God's sake. You see these Yale students complaining about their oppression. It just leaves me aghast. It's like, well, we're against the ruling class. It's like, no, you're baby ruling class members. You're young. The only reason you're not rich is because you're young. That's the best. Really, if you look at the 1%, even the dreaded 1%, most of those people are old. Why? Well, when you progress through life, if you're reasonably successful, you trade in your promising youth for your wealthy old age, but you're still bloody old. Would you trade it? Would you trade your youth for that? Like, if you factor age out of the economic equation, things look a lot different. Well, of course, older people have more money. If they have any sense, they've been collecting it for their whole life. Is that somehow unfair? It's not unfair unless you want to be poverty-stricken when you're 70, and you don't want to be poverty-stricken when you're 70. So I just don't understand what's happened to the universities. I can't believe that you're not told when you come the first day, look, man, you're here on a heroic mission. You're going to take your capacity to articulate yourself to levels that are undreamed of. You're going to come out of here unstoppable. You're going to be able to do anything you want. It's like, that's what you're here for. Instead, you're taught that, well, the world's a pretty oppressive place, and you're probably the bottom of the victim pile, and there's virtually nothing you can do about it except deconstruct the patriarchy. And it's so weak-kneed and so pathetic that universities should be embarrassed that that's what they're peddling to students. I'm embarrassed by it. I've gone on public record telling parents, bloody well, send your boys to trade school, because at least they'll learn something useful. Yeah. And that's a terrible thing for someone like me to say, because I do believe that being articulated and educated in the highest possible manner there's nothing that's better for you and for society. And why have the universities forgotten this? Well, that's postmodern neo-Marxism for you, and the philosophy of intense resentment and oppression and group identity. And God, it's just pathetic.
Dr. Peterson, I think a lot of students here would agree with you that one of the main purposes of education at college, particularly at Harvard, is to develop their sense of articulation, their ability to read, their ability to critically think. But then what comes after? Particularly at Harvard, there's a big discussion on what is a good life? What does it mean to use those skills that we get here, and then we graduate? What do we do from there?
Stop unnecessary suffering. That's what you do. That's your calling. It's like you say, well, what do you do after you graduate? Well, if you graduate articulated and powerful, there will be people giving you so many opportunities you won't even be able to keep up with them.
Okay, I'm gonna pause it here for a second. Some of you may be wondering why I'm letting it go on since he's not talking about the addiction in this part, but I view it all holistically as part of the same thing. He's talking about purpose and meaning and being a confident person who is knowledgeable and who has spent time learning, educating yourself, whether you're in college or not, and focusing on things that matter. And the answer to that question there, where the student asked him about, okay, let's say you've done that, what comes next? And he says, limiting human suffering. And that just makes me feel emotional inside a little bit, because so much of addiction is inflicting human suffering on yourself. It's not just that it's a waste of time. It's not just that it's an avoidance of life, of going out and experiencing and getting all the good things he's talking about and contributing to good things and creating good things. It's not just that you're missing all that. It's that you are actively inflicting needless suffering on yourself. And also, usually in the case of addiction, on people around you who you love. And it just makes my heart break, right? Because I spent years doing that. And so, thank you to the people in the chat who are sharing their experiences. And I absolutely agree with one of the previous comments about, it's loneliness, it's boredom, it's all these different things that can lead to it. Avoidance, like I've mentioned, or procrastination, or not wanting to feel certain things. But it's also, sometimes it's born out of a self-hatred, or a hatred for being or for humanity. Sometimes self-hatred. One of the things Jordan Peterson says to do, if you're a person who has unresolved trauma in your past, and a lot of people do. I'm not talking about PTSD or things that get overused today. I'm just saying trauma itself. A lot of people still have something like that from the childhood that they haven't resolved. And you hear this a lot in AA. You hear people, once they give up the crutch and the mask, and they give up the alcohol or whatever it was that was holding them back, and that was helping them to avoid dealing with this thing that they've never dealt with. You will hear that thing they've never dealt with start to come up. You'll hear people in meetings talking about things from childhood that maybe in some ways led them to this particular crutch. And one of the things Jordan Peterson suggests to do, that I've seen in other lectures, that I think is very helpful, and I just had a friend this week do this about something in their life and found it to be very helpful, is if you find yourself coming back to something over and over, like repetitive thoughts about something traumatic, or maybe you're not coming back to that because you're drinking too much, and so you don't have to think about it or feel it. One of the things he suggests to do is to write it down, to articulate it in the written word, and to get it out of yourself. Not necessarily, not to share publicly, or maybe to share with anyone ever. Maybe you do choose to share it with someone, but just for yourself, just for you, just to write it down for you, and to get it out as a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you write that out, if you write that story of that trauma that you went through out, it lessens the impact of it. It lessens the hold that it has over you, because now you've not only relived it in the expressing of it and writing it down, but you've also put it out there as something exterior to you. It is a story in your past now. So that's something else I would suggest. And maybe that doesn't apply to some people who are struggling with addictions, but I know for a lot of people it does. And I think you should try that. If you haven't tried that, try writing it out. Another thing that he suggests that I found very helpful is to write the story of your life, the past, the present, and the future. He has entire programs on this that can help you do this. I forget what it's called. There's a whole program where, he gives you the prompts and you're walked through how to do this. But if you are a person who is stuck in an addiction, possibly because of feelings of hopelessness, or maybe you're struggling with overcoming depression or nihilism, or looking around at the world around us and how crazy it is right now, and understandably feeling depressed about that or about the future, one of the things you can do is write out a story of who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. And the very act of writing out that future you, of where you see yourself in 5 years or 10 years, what it is you want to be doing, what does that future version of yourself look like, the ideal version. It helps psychologically to start to see that as a real possibility, as someone that you're moving towards, as someone that you're becoming. There's something in the physical act of writing something out, not just thinking about it, but putting it pen to paper. Again, even if it's especially if it's just for you, to help you envision that, to help it become a reality. It's almost like the hypnosis that I mentioned before. It plants a seed in your mind and it becomes more of a reality for you that you can return to. So that's just a practical exercise, I would say, that you could do. Maybe you've never thought about it. I was one of those people who hadn't thought about it. I was so busy drowning out stuff from the past, keeping stuff from the past in the present, right? And not dealing with it, that I didn't even envision the future. I didn't even have a vision of my future for a long time. So if you don't have a vision of your future, if you don't know what you're working towards, if you're just merely getting by every day and struggling every day in this chaotic world we find ourselves in, if you don't have a goal that you're aiming towards or something that you want to see for yourself and in your life, then no wonder you feel stuck where you are. You have to actually figure out what that is and take time envisioning where you want to be to end up there. It's not going to happen by accident. So I've got some things in the chat I wanted to highlight. Two sisters and some yarn. Hello, lady. She says lots of things are addictive besides alcohol and drugs. Look at phones. Yes. That's one of the things that I would like to curtail in my life a bit. Excuse me, is the amount of time spent on social media. My husband and I talk about this a lot. And we have different levels of engagement on social media. You know, on the one hand, I get positive things from being there. I feel like I better understand things that are going on, not just in the world, but things that are sentiments and that are growing. I feel like it helps me to understand what's going on with my fellow humans to be on there. And it also helps me to articulate my ideas and to try and express myself and try and talk about the very same things I talk about on Deprogrammed with people. But at the same time, do I spend too much time on there? Yes, I do. I know that. And I know that because on days where I shut it off, like I had a whole week, last week or the week before, where I was on the road with my husband. I took a week off from podcast and also didn't spend as much time online. And this is how I knew it had become a problem, because I had that thing. I had that thing that, that an addict has for their former drug of choice, where they're like a craving for it. I would have to stop myself from feeling like, oh, I'm not doing my job. I'm not on, like I'm doing something wrong by not being on there. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was doing something wonderful by turning it off. And so that was a sign to me that, like, oh, I need to do this more often, so it doesn't feel so strange not to be online all the time. And yeah, that's probably one of the biggest ones people have today. I've seen studies about young people and the levels, and not just young people are our age, who the anxiety that they experience when their phone is taken away from them for a few hours. That's a sign that there might be a problem. Night Train says, yeah, the best thing I did when I stopped drinking was I remember Night Train, you talking about this before, and congratulations, by the way. Night Train says, the best thing I did when I stopped drinking was getting closer to God and writing my novel and short story, soon to be stories. Amazing. That's exactly what Peterson's talking about. It's, finding something that you have greater affection for, that you want to do, that you're compelled to do, and the compulsion to do it is greater than the compulsion to do the bad habit that's giving you some momentary pleasure, but not long-lasting pleasure. Two Sisters in Some Yarn has a suggestion for anyone looking to pick up a good new hobby, a productive hobby. She says, come to the yarny side. You'll not save money, but you'll get a hat. That's great. Randy is pointing out also, if you're in the Austin, Texas area, Jordan Peterson's tour is coming here on Tuesday the 23rd at 7:30. Tickets still available. That's awesome. This coming week, Scott McKenzie, got to see him and Konstantin Kisin in Fort Worth on Monday and said it was excellent. I love Konstantin Kisin. I don't doubt that it was great. John Thomas, I completely agree with this. John Thomas says, when they silenced and denigrated people like Jordan Peterson, then they got people like Andrew Tate. Yep. What a great observation, right? It's been a while since I've watched a lot of Peterson's clips back to back, like I did this morning, and I think I had the feeling about it that many of you were having in the chat, which is just, what a treasure. I think he's helped so many people to improve their lives. He helped me to improve my life. And I often hear, oh, he's just, all the things that I think Andrew Tate actually is, someone like Andrew Tate actually is. Peterson used to get accused of being that and still is accused of being that. And like, there's no distinction, like words don't mean anything anymore. And I need to spend more time. I guess what I'm saying is I need to spend more time watching his new videos and less time watching the videos and, getting riled about the videos of people who I think are absolute trash, like Tate. So that's me. That's me. Rhonda Santos has some good advice. She says, physical activity is good. Bonus points if it's a bit more complex, like rock climbing, hiking, uneven terrain, etc. Yes, I've done some rock climbing. I wanna get back into it. I did rock climbing when I was in Los Angeles, and man, that was something totally different and new and also terrifying to me. Not I think it was terrifying to me because of the heights. Like, we did it, my friend and I my friend was really skilled at rock climbing. We went to a rock climbing gym a few times, and then we went out to some actual rocks in the wild and climbed and that was terrifying to me. I mean, I've jumped out of a plane before, but this was scarier, I think, because when you jump out of a plane, my brain anyway just couldn't really conceptualize how high up I was. It just seemed it was something completely unreal. Whereas when you're rock climbing, you're still close enough to the ground that I'm very aware that if I fall. So that was good because it helped me to deal with that fear a little and to put some trust trust my own capabilities. But hey, Midnight's Edge, good to see you. I want to get you on this show. I get to see you all the time on Toxic Femme, but I would love to have you on Deprogrammed. I will talk to you off air. Brahma Bull's here. Howdy, Tom. Good to see you, Brahma Bull. Okay. I don't know how helpful this was, but if you have, I don't know, if you have specific questions for me, I don't know if this is exactly what the people asking for this episode were hoping for. Hopefully you find it helpful. If you have questions for me about addiction and sobriety, you can also always ask me in social media, like I mentioned that I'm on. I generally I get a lot of messages. I'm not able to get back to everyone, but if I see one about that specific issue, I try and make an effort to get back to people about that one because I know how hard that is, and I think it's one of the best things you can do to root those toxic habits out of your life and make room for positive habits. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I'll be wrapping it up. We are coming up on this week, Monday. I will see you at 1:00 Central at my usual time, and then Wednesday we're going to be doing another that Christian panel. But then Friday, I'm not sure yet. I'm probably not going to do a show this coming Friday because we're going to do a meetup for people who are in the Austin, Texas area for Minds Fest, and I'll be announcing where that's at. But I will see you guys on Monday, and I hope you have a great weekend. Take care.